The morning sky over New York turned black with alien ships, and Captain Jake Morrison knew the world had changed forever. He watched from the bridge of his orbital defense station as massive dark vessels emerged from the void like hungry insects drawn to fresh meat. The ships were wrong in every way that mattered, built with curves and spikes that hurt to look at and painted in colors that made his eyes. Jake had been a soldier for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The alien fleet stretched across space like a disease spreading through clean tissue. Each ship was the size of a city block, and they moved with purpose that made his stomach turn. These creatures had done this before. The first plasma bolt hit Manhattan at exactly 9:15 in the morning. Jake watched through his sensors as the energy beam carved through buildings like a hot knife through butter. The Empire State Building simply vanished in a flash of green fire. Then came the screaming over the radio channels as every frequency filled with panic and terror. Down on Earth, Dr. Amanda Collins was studying blood samples in her Atlanta laboratory when the world ended. The first she knew of the invasion was when her assistant ran into the room with tears streaming down her face. Amanda looked up from her microscope to see the news reports, showing cities burning across the globe. The aliens were not interested in military targets alone. They hit hospitals first, then schools, then refugee centers where people had gathered seeking safety. Amanda watched the footage and realized these creatures understood exactly what they were doing. They were breaking human spirit before they broke human bodies. General Peter Hayes stood in the war room at NORAD, watching his screens fill with red marks as every major city on Earth came under attack. His weapons were useless against the alien shields. Nuclear missiles simply bounced off their hulls like raindrops on glass. Conventional weapons did nothing at all. The aliens broadcast their first message at noon. The signal hijacked every television, radio, and internet connection on the planet. The creature that appeared on screens across the world was something from nightmares. It stood 12 feet tall with 4 arms ending in razor claws and a head that was mostly mouth filled with teeth like broken glass. War Prime. Zechthel spoke in perfect English, though his voice sounded like metal scraping against bone. He explained that Earth would be reduced to exactly 500 million human slaves. The rest would die slowly, while their suffering was broadcast across 17 star systems as entertainment and warning. The creatures called themselves the Vorthic Collective, and they had been doing this for centuries. They had perfected the art of breaking species through terror. They did not simply conquer worlds. They destroyed the will to resist in every living thing that breathed. Their ground forces landed in Central Park while Jake watched helplessly from orbit. The creatures were insectoid nightmares that moved like spiders and killed like demons. They stood 8 feet tall with chitinous armor that reflected weapons fire and limbs, designed for tearing flesh from bone. Amanda saw the first bioweapon attack through her laboratory windows. The aliens released clouds of glittering spores that settled over the city like deadly snow. Anyone who breathed the spores began screaming and did not stop until their hearts gave out from exhaustion. The lucky ones died quickly. The fear spores were worse than the killing spores. They turned brave men into whimpering children and sent entire crowds running in blind panic that trampled thousands underfoot. Even the animals went mad with terror, dogs and cats and birds all fleeing in mindless horror from something there. Instincts could not understand. General Hayes tried to coordinate a defense, but his communications were jammed by alien broadcasts of human suffering. The creatures had recording devices that captured every scream and sob and played them back on loop across military frequencies. His own soldiers began breaking down as they listened to the sounds of children dying. Jake attempted one desperate attack run with his remaining fighters, but the alien point defenses turned his squadron into vapor before they could even target the enemy ships. He watched good pilots die in seconds while their killers did not even slow down. By evening, the major population centers were burning ruins filled with the dead and dying. The Vorthak had not conquered Earth so much as they had turned it into a laboratory for studying human pain. They set up harvesting centers in every city where they began collecting humans for experiments that made death seem like mercy. Amanda managed to reach her secure laboratory bunker before the spores reached her building. She sealed herself inside with emergency supplies and began analyzing samples of the alien bioweapons. What she found made her hands shake with rage more than fear. The spores were designed with perfect knowledge of human biology. These creatures had studied her species before attacking. They knew exactly how to cause maximum suffering with minimum effort. They had planned this genocide with scientific precision. General Hayes retreated to his mountain bunker as reports came in from around the world. London was gone. Tokyo was burning. Moscow had gone silent. The aliens were methodical in their destruction, working from a checklist that covered every major population center on the planet. Jake made it back to his base as the orbital stations began falling one by one. The aliens did not destroy them quickly. They captured them intact so they could broadcast the torture of their crews. Back to Earth, he could hear his friends dying over the radio as he prepared to evacuate to the surface, but in hidden bunkers and forgotten basements, human scientists and soldiers began taking notes. They recorded everything about their attackers. They studied alien tactics and technology and biology with the desperate focus of people who had nothing left to lose. Amanda made the first discovery that would change everything. The fear spores that drove most Earth creatures insane had no effect on humans who had already lost everything they cared about. The aliens had made their first mistake. They had created enemies who could no longer feel fear, because they had already experienced the worst thing possible. As the first day of the invasion ended, the Vorthak settled in to enjoy their new hunting ground. They had broken 17 other species using these exact same methods. Humans would be no different. They were wrong. 3 months after the sky burned, Lieutenant Colonel Danny Rodriguez crouched in the ruins of what used to be downtown Los Angeles and watched the alien patrol move through the rubble like hunting spiders. The Vorthak had claimed the surface of Earth, but they had not claimed the humans who still lived in the dark spaces below. Danny's team included combat engineer Lisa Park, who could build bombs from anything, former Navy SEAL Kevin Wright, who moved like a ghost through the alien-controlled zones, and biochemist Dr. Nathan Ford, who had escaped from a Vorthak research facility with knowledge that made him valuable and dangerous. The aliens had spent 3 months teaching humanity about fear and pain. They had built harvesting centers in every major city where human children were taken to be turned into living weapons through biological experiments that would have made demons weep. Parents were forced to watch as their babies were cut open and rebuilt into things that barely remembered being human. Lisa Park had lost her 8-year-old daughter in the first week of the invasion. She found pieces of the girl scattered across a Vorthak testing ground along with the remains of hundreds of other children. Now Lisa built explosive devices with the focused hatred of someone who had seen hell and decided to bring it to others. The resistance had learned that Vorthak ground forces followed predictable patterns based on their insect nature. They hunted during certain hours, avoided others, and communicated through chemical signals that could be detected and analyzed. Dr. Ford had been working on understanding these signals since his escape from alien captivity. Kevin Wright had spent 2 months studying Vorthak anatomy by dissecting captured specimens while they were still alive. He had learned where to cut to cause maximum pain and minimum death. His methods would have horrified his former commanders, but his former commanders were dead or worse. The breakthrough came when Dr. Ford discovered that alien communication involved both chemical pheromones and bioelectric frequencies. The creatures literally spoke with their entire bodies, sending signals through the air that other Vorthak could detect from miles away. Ford built a device that could intercept these signals, and eventually learned to mimic them. Danny's first victory came when his team used fake Vorthak distress calls to lure an entire alien patrol into a carefully prepared killing ground. Lisa had rigged the abandoned subway tunnel with enough explosives to bring down 3 city blocks. When the aliens entered the tunnel following what they thought was a wounded comrade, she turned them into green paste that painted the walls. The aliens did not die quietly. They screamed in frequencies that made human teeth ache and released pheromones that smelled like rotting flowers mixed with burning copper. But they died, and that was what mattered to people who had nothing left but revenge. Meanwhile, Marine Sergeant Amy Turner had been captured during a failed rescue mission and taken to Harvesting Center 7 in what used to be Chicago. She spent 6 weeks in alien custody watching horrors that would have driven weaker minds to madness. The Vorthak forced human parents to choose which of their children would be experimented on first. Those who refused to choose watched as the aliens tortured both children to death in ways designed to maximize parental suffering. Those who did choose lived with guilt that ate them alive, while their surviving child was slowly converted into something that might once have been human. Amy memorized every detail of the facility during her captivity. She learned alien patrol schedules, security procedures, and the layout of the experimental chambers where human children were rebuilt into biological weapons. She also learned that the Vorthak had a rigid hierarchy based on genetic markers that determined their role in their society. Her escape came during a prisoner transfer when she killed 3 guards using techniques Kevin Wright had taught the resistance fighters. She used alien claws to cut alien throats and alien acid blood to dissolve her restraints. By the time she reached friendly territory, she carried intelligence that would change how humans fought the war. General Peter Hayes had established a new command center in an abandoned mine complex in Colorado, where the mountains provided natural shielding from alien sensors. He debriefed Amy personally and realized that humanity was not fighting a war in any traditional sense. They were being exterminated by creatures who saw them as nothing more than interesting insects to be studied and discarded. Dr. Amanda Collins had spent 3 months in her bunker laboratory reverse engineering alien bioweapons and making discoveries that filled her with cold rage. The Vorthak biological arsenal was designed with perfect knowledge of human physiology gained through the torture of previous captives. Every weapon had been tested on human subjects until it achieved maximum suffering, but Collins also discovered that alien bioweapons could be modified and turned back against their creators. The fear spores that drove humans mad could be altered to affect Vorthak nervous systems in ways their designers had never anticipated. The killing spores could be reprogrammed to target alien biology instead of human. She shared her research with Dr. Ford through encrypted communications that used alien frequencies to avoid detection. Together they began developing weapons that would teach the Vorthak what it felt like to be afraid. The first field test came when Danny's team deployed modified fear spores against a Vorthak patrol in the ruins of Phoenix. The aliens who had spent months spreading terror suddenly found themselves experiencing it for the first time in their lives. They fled screaming through the desert while their own pheromone communications spread panic through nearby alien forces. Kevin Wright led the team that captured the fleeing aliens for study. They learned that Vorthak pain responses were far more intense than human ones due to their enhanced nervous systems. What would cause discomfort in a human would cause agony in an alien. What would cause pain in a human would drive an alien insane. General Hayes authorized the expansion of resistance operations based on these discoveries. If the Vorthak wanted to teach humanity about suffering, then humanity would prove to be excellent students who surpassed their teachers. Dr. Collins developed a retrovirus specifically designed for Vorthak biology that did not kill its victims, but instead stripped away their ability to feel anything except pain and terror while leaving their intelligence intact. The virus spread through alien pheromone communication networks, like wildfire through dry grass. The first large-scale deployment came during the Battle of Denver when resistance fighters released the virus into the air supply of a major alien stronghold. Within hours, the entire garrison was writhing in agony that their enhanced nervous systems made unbearable. They broadcast their suffering across their own communication networks, spreading panic through alien forces across the continent. Amy Turner joined Danny's team and brought with her detailed knowledge of alien psychology gained through months of captivity. She knew which sounds made them afraid, which smells triggered their flight responses, and which visual patterns caused them to freeze in terror. The resistance began using this knowledge to turn the aliens' own tactics against them. They broadcast recordings of Vorthak death screams on frequencies the aliens used for coordination. They released pheromones that triggered primal fear responses in the alien hindbrain. They painted their weapons with patterns that caused alien vision to malfunction. By the end of the 4th month, something had changed in the war. The Vorthak were still in control of Earth's surface, but they no longer moved with the confidence of apex predators. They had learned that their prey could bite back, and some bites were poisonous. The aliens began avoiding certain areas where resistance activity was highest. Their patrols moved faster and stayed together in larger groups. Their communications became more frequent and carried undertones of nervousness that human monitoring equipment could detect. General Hayes realized that humanity had stopped trying to win a conventional war against a superior enemy. They had started something far more dangerous, a campaign of terror designed to teach the galaxy's apex predators what it felt like to be afraid. The Vorthak had brought hell to Earth expecting to find victims. Instead, they had found students who learned quickly and applied their lessons with interest. 6 months after the invasion began, Captain Jake Morrison led his urban warfare unit through the ruins of Chicago and realized he no longer recognized the soldiers under his command. They moved through alien-controlled territory with predatory grace that reminded him more of hunting animals than human beings. Sergeant Rick Barnes had developed techniques that would have horrified military commanders in the old world. His hunter squads used modified Vorthak fear spores as weapons, turning the aliens' own bioweapons against them in ways their creators had never imagined. Barnes had learned to extract terror-inducing chemicals from captured aliens and deploy them like poison gas against enemy positions. The creatures that had once seemed invincible now fled in panic when they detected the modified pheromone signatures that Barnes' teams could project. Entire alien patrols would abandon their positions and run screaming into the wasteland when they caught the scent of their own engineered nightmares turned back against them. Dr. Nathan Ford had established a laboratory in the basement of a ruined hospital where he worked with biological samples that would have been considered war crimes in any civilized conflict. He had learned to culture Vorthak neural tissue and use it to create weapons that attacked alien nervous systems with surgical precision. His first successful deployment turned a battalion of Vorthak warriors into writhing masses of agony that broadcast their suffering across their own communication networks. The psychological effect on remaining alien forces was immediate and devastating. They began avoiding human settlements entirely. Afraid of what new horror awaited them in the shadows, Colonel Sandra Bell commanded special operations teams in the Pacific Northwest that had mastered psychological warfare in ways that disturbed even other resistance fighters. Her units had learned to skin captured Vorthak alive using the aliens' own regenerative abilities to keep them conscious throughout the process. The screams of tortured aliens were recorded and broadcast on frequencies the Vorthak used for coordination. Bell's teams had discovered that alien hearing was far more sensitive than human hearing, making certain sounds physically painful to creatures that had evolved to communicate through subtle audio cues. Dr. Amanda Collins emerged from her bunker laboratory after 6 months of isolation, carrying research that changed the fundamental nature of the war. She had discovered that Vorthak reproduction required complex rituals involving their war prime leaders and specific environmental conditions that could be disrupted or corrupted. Collins had developed a targeted retrovirus that did not kill infected aliens, but instead stripped away their ability to experience anything except pain and terror, while leaving their intelligence completely intact. The virus spread through alien pheromone networks like a plague of madness that turned entire populations into screaming monuments to human vengeance. General Hayes authorized Protocol Pandora. After reviewing Collins' research and the field reports from resistance units across the globe, the protocol involved the systematic capture and conversion of Vorthak forces into living weapons against their own species using techniques that blurred the line between science and torture. Human scientists began grafting alien biotechnology onto volunteer soldiers who understood that the procedures would change them in ways that could never be reversed. These hybrid warriors retained human intelligence and creativity while gaining Vorthek physical advantages and an intuitive understanding of alien weaknesses, staff. Sergeant Claire Mitchell became the first successful hybrid after volunteering for experimental surgery that replaced half her nervous system with Vorthek neural tissue. The procedure left her with enhanced strength, speed, and sensory perception, but also gave her access to alien pheromone communication networks. Mitchell's first mission involved infiltrating a Vorthek command post by wearing the chemically treated skin of a dead alien. She moved through enemy positions for 3 days while her human team tracked her progress through modified alien communication equipment that Dr. Ford had developed. Her objective was not to gather intelligence or sabotage equipment, but to plant a modified fear spore that would spread through the alien command structure like a virus. The spore was designed to trigger cascading terror responses that would leave alien commanders catatonic but aware of their helplessness. The operation succeeded beyond all expectations. Within hours of Mitchell's deployment, the entire Vorthek command structure in North America began broadcasting distress calls that spoke of nightmares beyond description. Alien forces across the continent abandoned their positions and fled toward their orbital ships in blind panic. Jake Morrison watched from the ruins of Chicago as Vorthek evacuation ships lifted off from former human cities. The aliens were retreating, not because they had been defeated in battle, but because they had learned to fear what humans could become when pushed beyond all limits of civilized behavior. Dr. Ford's biological weapons had evolved beyond simple toxins into something that attacked the very concept of Vorthek civilization. His latest creation was a viral information pattern that spread through alien communication networks and drove entire populations to self-destructive madness. The pattern was based on human mathematical concepts that alien minds were not equipped to process. When Vorthek attempted to understand the information, their neural networks entered feedback loops that produced increasing levels of psychological distress until their sanity collapsed entirely. Rick Barnes led raids on abandoned alien facilities where his teams collected biotechnology and specimens for human research programs. They had learned to keep captured aliens alive indefinitely using the creature's own regenerative capabilities, while harvesting organs and neural tissue for weapon development. The aliens who had once casually tortured human children to death now experienced suffering that made their previous victims' agony seem merciful by comparison. Barnes had become an expert in alien anatomy and knew exactly how to inflict maximum pain while preventing death or unconsciousness. Colonel Bell's psychological warfare units had developed techniques that turned alien communication networks into weapons against their own users. They broadcast carefully crafted information patterns that triggered primal terror responses in any Vorthek who received them. The broadcasts included recordings of human children laughing mixed with the sounds of alien death screams and mathematical sequences that caused alien minds to experience cascading panic attacks. The effect was so devastating that Vorthek forces began shutting down their own communication systems to avoid exposure. Claire Mitchell reported from deep within alien territory that the creatures were no longer functioning as a unified military force. Fear had spread through their ranks like a plague, breaking down their command structure and turning disciplined soldiers into panicked refugees. The hybrid soldiers had formed their own unit under Mitchell's command as more volunteers underwent the conversion process. They retained enough humanity to remember why they fought, but had gained enough alien characteristics to hunt their enemies with predatory efficiency that shocked even hardened resistance fighters. War Prime Zechthel attempted to open negotiations with human leadership through hijacked communication networks. His broadcast spoke of surrender terms and withdrawal from Earth in exchange for an end to human retaliation against Vorthek forces. The response came from Claire Mitchell speaking in perfect Vorthek bioelectric language from the bridge of a captured alien ship. Her words were broadcast across all Vorthek frequencies and translated into human languages for the resistance to hear. She told Zechthel that his species had taught humanity about fear and pain and suffering beyond imagination. Now they would learn what came after fear when a species discovered that some things were worse than death, the aliens who had conquered. 17 star systems through Terror were about to discover what terror really meant when applied by a species that had nothing left to lose and everything to teach about the true meaning of revenge. General Hayes monitored the transformation of his own species with growing awareness that humans were becoming something new and dangerous. His soldiers returned from missions changed in ways that went beyond simple battlefield experience. They carried alien biotechnology in their bodies and alien thoughts in their minds, but they remembered human loss with perfect clarity. They had become predators that combined human creativity with alien capabilities, and the result was something that made their former enemies flee in terror. The war had stopped being about survival and become about teaching the galaxy a lesson that would echo across the stars for generations to come. 1 year after first contact, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of a ship built from human engineering and alien biotechnology and watched Vorthok orbital stations burn in the void above Earth. His body had been modified with enemy biology until he was no longer entirely human, but he remembered human loss with perfect clarity that drove him forward. The war had changed both species in ways that neither had expected. The Vorthok who had arrived as confident conquerors now huddled in their remaining ships, afraid to send landing parties to a planet that had become a nightmare factory beyond their comprehension. Morrison's enhanced physiology allowed him to survive in toxic environments and communicate directly with alien technology, but the psychological cost was enormous. He led Reaper teams that hunted enemy forces with predatory efficiency that horrified human observers who remembered what their species used to be. His crews were a mixture of pure humans and hybrid soldiers who had volunteered for conversion procedures that blurred the line between science and body horror. They retained human intelligence and creativity while possessing enhanced physical capabilities that made them effective hunters of creatures that had once seemed invincible. Dr. Amanda Collins had established research facilities in former alien harvesting centers where she conducted experiments that would have been considered crimes against nature in the old world. She used captured Vorthok as test subjects for bioweapons development, justifying each atrocity by remembering the screams of human children she had been unable to save. Her latest creation was a neural parasite that allowed humans to control Vorthok minds while keeping the aliens conscious and aware of their helplessness. The parasites were cultivated from hybrid human-alien brain tissue and implanted directly into enemy nervous systems through surgical procedures that left the victims alive but no longer in control of their own bodies. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Rodriguez discovered that his resistance fighters had developed techniques that made seasoned soldiers vomit when they witnessed them. His teams infiltrated alien ships by wearing the skinned faces of dead enemies and mimicking Vorthok pheromone signatures with chemical precision that allowed them to walk among alien crews undetected. The humans would spend days or weeks aboard enemy vessels, learning alien routines and identifying key personnel before striking. When they finally revealed themselves, they did so in ways designed to maximize psychological impact on surviving witnesses who would carry tales of human monsters back to their own forces. Rodriguez had learned to think like his enemies, using their own methods against them but with human creativity that made alien torture techniques seem primitive by comparison. His soldiers no longer resembled the people they had been before the invasion began. The hybrid soldiers under Staff Sergeant Claire Mitchell had evolved beyond both parent species into something that disturbed observers from either side of the conflict. They retained human memories and motivations but thought with alien logic. That allowed them to predict enemy behavior with supernatural accuracy. Mitchell's team specialized in hunting war prime leaders using techniques that combined human psychology with alien biology. They would track their targets for months, learning their habits and fears before striking in ways that left the aliens wishing for simple death. The hybrids had developed their own culture that mixed human traditions with alien practices in ways that created something entirely new. They remembered being human, but they were no longer limited by human physical or mental constraints. Dr. Nathan Ford had perfected biological terrorism into an art form that made traditional weapons seem crude and inefficient. His latest weapons attacked Vorthok civilization at the genetic level, rewriting alien DNA to transform entire populations into living monuments to human revenge. Ford's creations included modified viruses that turned alien, regenerative abilities against their hosts, parasites that fed on alien neural tissue while keeping their victims conscious, and information patterns that caused alien minds to experience cascading breakdowns when exposed to human mathematical concepts. His laboratory had become a factory for horrors that combined human scientific knowledge with alien biotechnology, in ways that produced results neither species could have achieved alone. The creatures that emerged from his work were weapons designed to inflict suffering that lasted for generations. General Hayes monitored the transformation of human civilization from his command bunker and realized that his species had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The soldiers who returned from missions were changed in fundamental ways that went beyond simple combat experience. They carried alien biotechnology in their bodies and alien thoughts in their minds, but they retained human hatred with perfect clarity. They had become something new and terrible that combined the worst aspects of both species while retaining the creativity and adaptability that made humans dangerous. Earth cities were being reclaimed, but the humans who walked their streets were no longer the same species that had built them. They moved with predatory grace and watched the sky with eyes that held alien knowledge and human rage in equal measure. The Vorthak attempted to negotiate through intermediaries from other conquered species, but every delegation met the same fate. They were captured and used as test subjects for the next generation of human bioweapons while their suffering was broadcast back to their homeworlds as a warning. War Prime Zekfel sent increasingly desperate messages offering complete withdrawal from Earth and reparations for the damage caused by the invasion. The responses he received were recorded screams of his own officers who had been captured and converted into living laboratories for human research. Claire Mitchell commanded raids on alien research stations where her hybrid teams collected specimens and technology for Earth's growing biotechnology industry. The facilities that had once been used to torture human captives were converted into production centers for weapons that turned alien biology against itself. The hybrid soldiers had learned to think like their enemies while retaining human creativity that allowed them to develop new forms of warfare that combined psychological torture with biological terrorism. They were no longer fighting to reclaim Earth, but to teach the galaxy what happened to species that threatened human children. Dr. Collins emerged from her laboratory carrying samples of her latest creation, a virus that attacked the very concept of Vorthak reproduction by rewriting the genetic code of their reproductive organs. The virus spread through alien populations like wildfire, ensuring that any survivors of the conflict would be the last generation of their species. The viral weapon was designed to cause maximum psychological damage by allowing its victims to understand exactly what was happening to them while being powerless to prevent it. Infected aliens would watch their species die slowly over generations, while knowing that their extinction was the direct result of their own actions. Jake Morrison received reports from hybrid infiltrators that Vorthak fleets throughout their empire were fragmenting as news of Earth's transformation spread through alien communication networks. Species that had served the collective for centuries were rebelling as they learned what humans had become. The aliens had created an enemy that surpassed them in every form of warfare they understood and several forms they had never imagined. Fear spread through their ranks faster than human ships could travel as stories of Earth's transformation reached the furthest corners of their territory. Dr. Ford's information weapons had begun affecting alien civilizations that had never heard of Earth as viral thought patterns spread through galactic communication networks. The mere knowledge of what humans had become was enough to drive some species to madness. General Hayes authorized the construction of ships designed to carry the war beyond Earth's solar system. The vessels combined human engineering with alien biotechnology and were crewed by hybrid soldiers who remembered human loss while possessing alien capabilities. The first expedition left Earth orbit carrying a cargo of biological weapons designed to teach the galaxy that some species should never be pushed to their breaking point. The crew included volunteers who had been so changed by the war that they could no longer live on the world they had fought to defend. Claire Mitchell stood on the bridge of the lead ship and watched Earth fall behind them as they headed toward the heart of former Vorthek territory. Her mission was simple: find any surviving alien populations and demonstrate what humanity had learned about the true meaning of terror. The species that had brought hell to Earth was about to discover that humans had improved upon the concept and were eager to share their innovations with the rest of the galaxy. 18 months after the invasion began, Admiral Jake Morrison commanded the human fleet from the bridge of the warship Vengeance as it entered orbit around the first Vorthek colony world. His body was more alien than human now, but his mind retained perfect memories of burning cities and screaming children that drove him forward with implacable purpose. The fleet that followed him into enemy territory consisted of ships built with hybrid technology that combined human engineering with alien biotechnology. The crews included both pure humans and converted soldiers who had volunteered for procedures that changed them into something new and terrible. Dr. Amanda Collins, now calling herself the Architect of Necessity, deployed the first wave of bioweapons from orbit as human forces prepared to land on the alien world. Her creations did not kill the Vorthek population, but instead transformed their colonies into living laboratories where captured aliens experienced the same tortures they had once inflicted on human children. The bioweapons were designed with perfect knowledge of alien biology gained through months of experimentation on captured specimens. They attacked Vorthek nervous systems in ways that produced suffering that lasted for generations, while keeping their victims alive and aware of their condition. Ground forces under Colonel Sandra Bell landed in former alien cities and began establishing research centers where captured Vorthek were studied and modified using their own biotechnology. Bell's troops had perfected terror warfare into an art form that made traditional military action seem primitive by comparison. They broadcast the results of their work across Vorthek communication networks, showing alien leaders exactly what happened to any species that threatened humanity. The broadcasts included detailed documentation of every procedure performed on captured aliens, along with recordings of their screams and pleas for mercy that would never come. The hybrid soldiers under Claire Mitchell had evolved beyond recognition as either human or alien. They retained enough of their original nature to remember why they fought, but had gained capabilities that allowed them to hunt their enemies with predatory efficiency that shocked observers from both species. Mitchell's forces specialized in capturing war prime leaders alive and keeping them functional long enough to extract information about other Vorthek colonies and military installations. The extraction procedures involved techniques that combined human psychology with alien biology in ways that produced results no interrogator from either species could have achieved alone. Dr. Nathan Ford had developed weapons that attacked the very foundation of Vorthek civilization by targeting their genetic memory and cultural programming. His latest creation was a viral meme that spread through alien communication networks and drove entire populations to self-destructive madness. The viral information pattern was based on human philosophical concepts that alien minds were not equipped to process. When Vorthek attempted to understand the transmitted data, their neural networks entered feedback loops that produced cascading psychological breakdowns that spread through their society like a plague of insanity. The first Vorthek colony world fell within days as its population succumbed to weapons that attacked their minds and bodies simultaneously. The survivors were collected and transported to research facilities, where they became test subjects for the next generation of human bioweapons. Admiral Morrison received reports from scout ships that other Vorthek colonies were already showing signs of panic as news of the human arrival spread through their communication networks. Entire civilian populations were fleeing toward the galactic rim in desperate attempts to escape the approaching terror. But human ships were faster than alien refugees, and hybrid crews could predict enemy movements with supernatural accuracy. Every fleeing vessel was intercepted and its occupants captured for study and experimentation that added to humanity's growing understanding of alien biology and psychology. The Vorthic collective began fragmenting as various factions attempted to surrender to human forces in hopes of receiving mercy that their own actions had made impossible. Each delegation was received with scientific interest and used to test new forms of biological warfare that pushed the boundaries of what living tissue could endure. Dr. Collins established permanent research stations on captured worlds where former Vorthic populations served as breeding stock for bioweapons that would be deployed against other alien species. The facilities operated with industrial efficiency that turned the production of suffering into a scientific discipline. General Hayes, now calling himself the Director of Consequences, coordinated humanity's expansion into former enemy territory. From his command center on Earth, every world that had once served the collective became a human research station where captured aliens were studied and modified for use as living weapons. The surviving Vorthic leadership realized they faced complete extinction as human forces methodically worked their way through former collective space. Their attempts to flee to unexplored regions of the galaxy were futile because hybrid soldiers could track them across interstellar distances using modified alien biotechnology. Claire Mitchell led deep space hunting expeditions that pursued fleeing Vorthic refugees with relentless determination. Her teams had learned to think like their prey while possessing capabilities that made escape impossible for creatures whose own technology had been turned against them. The hybrid crews of human ships had evolved their own culture that combined elements from both parent species while remaining loyal to human goals and objectives. They remembered being human, but they were no longer limited by human physical or psychological constraints. Dr. Ford's information weapons had begun affecting neutral alien civilizations as fear of humanity spread faster than human ships could travel. Species across the galaxy learned what happened to those who threatened Earth, and many chose suicide over the possibility of encountering human forces. The mere knowledge of human capabilities was enough to drive some alien populations to madness as they realized that their own biological and technological advantages meant nothing against an enemy that had learned to weaponize suffering itself. War Prime Zekthal made his final broadcast from a hidden facility in the galactic core where he attempted to rally remaining Vorthic forces for a last desperate stand against human expansion. His words were intercepted by human intelligence services and used to locate his position with surgical precision. The assault on Zekthal's stronghold was led by Claire Mitchell and her hybrid soldiers who had developed capabilities that made them effective hunters of creatures that had once seemed invincible. They moved through enemy defenses like predators stalking prey that had nowhere left to run. Zekthal was captured alive and transported to Dr. Collins' primary research facility where he became the subject of experiments designed to extract every piece of information about Vorthic biology and culture. The procedures lasted for months and provided humanity with complete knowledge of their enemies' weaknesses and capabilities. Admiral Morrison watched from orbit as the last Vorthic stronghold fell to human forces and realized that his species had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They had not simply defeated an enemy but had transformed the very concept of warfare into something that made traditional conquest seem merciful by comparison. The human fleet prepared to expand into unexplored regions of the galaxy carrying weapons and knowledge that would ensure no alien species ever again considered Earth's population to be easy prey. They had learned to become the thing that other creatures would have nightmares about if they survived long enough to dream. Dr. Ford's final report to human leadership concluded that the transformation was complete and irreversible. Humanity had evolved beyond its original nature into something that combined the worst aspects of both species while retaining the creativity and adaptability that made them uniquely dangerous. The galaxy would learn that there were some species that should never be pushed beyond their breaking point because what emerged from that experience was not broken, but rather something far more terrible than anything that had tried to break it in the first place. Earth's children would grow up in a universe where human supremacy was maintained through superior application of terror and biological warfare that made their enemies' former methods seem primitive and ineffective by comparison. The Vorthic collective no longer existed except as experimental subjects in human research facilities where their suffering served as a reminder of what happened to species that threatened human families. Their former territory had become a testing ground for weapons that would ensure humanity's dominance for generations to come. 3 years after the Vorthok brought hell to Earth, Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the memorial center built over Harvesting Site 7 and watched human children play among displays that showed the galaxy what happened to species that threatened Earth's population. The children laughed and ran while captured alien specimens watched from containment cells that served as living reminders of humanity's transformation. The Vorthok collective no longer existed as anything more than experimental subjects in human research facilities scattered across their former territory. Dr. Amanda Collins, now director of the Department of Biological Consequences, had converted entire alien populations into breeding stock for bioweapons that pushed the boundaries of what living tissue could endure. Former war prime leaders served as test subjects for procedures that extracted every piece of useful information from their minds and bodies, while keeping them functional enough to provide ongoing research data. Their suffering was documented with scientific precision and broadcast across galactic communication networks as a warning to other species. Morrison commanded a fleet of hybrid ships that patrolled former collective space with crews that had evolved beyond recognition as either human or alien. His soldiers retained human memories and motivations while possessing enhanced capabilities that made them effective hunters of any remaining enemy forces. The ships themselves were living organisms, built from hybrid technology that combined human engineering with alien biotechnology. They could repair themselves, adapt to new threats, and reproduce when necessary to maintain fleet strength without requiring traditional shipyards or manufacturing facilities. On Earth, the memorial centers served dual purposes as monuments to human loss and exhibitions of human revenge. Visitors could observe captured Vorthok in various stages of biological modification, while learning about the procedures that had transformed humanity's enemies into living weapons against their own species. Claire Mitchell had become something that disturbed even other hybrid soldiers as her evolution continued beyond the boundaries established for the original conversion procedures. She led expeditions to worlds that had once served the Vorthok, tracking down collaborator species and demonstrating that human capacity for creative revenge extended far beyond their original enemies. Her teams had developed techniques that combined psychological warfare with biological terrorism in ways that made traditional military actions seem primitive and ineffective. They could transform entire populations into monuments to human vengeance, while keeping them alive and aware of their condition. Dr. Nathan Ford's information weapons had evolved into viral thought patterns that spread through galactic communication networks faster than physical travel. Fear of humanity infected alien civilizations across the galaxy as species learned what happened to those who threatened Earth's children. The mere knowledge of human capabilities was enough to drive some alien populations to suicide rather than risk encountering human forces. Others retreated to the galactic rim and beyond, fleeing into unexplored space in desperate attempts to escape the expanding sphere of human influence. The surviving human population had been fundamentally changed by the war in ways that went beyond simple trauma or loss. Children born during the conflict grew up surrounded by exhibits of captured aliens and stories of human triumph through superior application of terror and biological warfare. They learned to understand that humanity's survival depended on ensuring that no alien species ever again considered humans to be prey. Education programs taught them to recognize potential threats and respond with overwhelming force that eliminated enemies before they could become dangerous. General Hayes, now elderly but enhanced with alien biotechnology to extend his lifespan indefinitely, oversaw the transformation of human civilization from a single-world species into a galactic power that maintained dominance through fear rather than conventional military strength. His final report to the reformed United Nations Security Council documented the complete success of humanity's transformation from victims to apex predators. The report concluded with a simple statement that had become humanity's unofficial motto: "They brought hell to Earth, and we showed them that humans invented hell." Dr. Collins established research centers on every world that had once served the Vorthik Collective, where captured aliens provided ongoing subjects for bioweapons development and testing. The facilities operated with industrial efficiency that turned the production of suffering into a scientific discipline. Her latest projects involved developing weapons that could be deployed against species that had never encountered humans, ensuring that first contact would always favor Earth's interests. The bioweapons were designed to attack alien psychology and biology simultaneously while providing complete control over enemy populations. The hybrid soldiers under Claire Mitchell's command had formed their own society that combined elements from both parent species while remaining completely loyal to human objectives. They served as humanity's enforcement arm in former enemy territory, ensuring that alien populations remained compliant and productive. Mitchell's forces had evolved capabilities that allowed them to predict and prevent alien rebellion before it could begin. They could read enemy thoughts through modified pheromone detection and respond to threats with surgical precision that eliminated problems without damaging useful research subjects. First contact protocols had been established for encounters with previously unknown alien species based on lessons learned during the Vorthik conflict. The protocols emphasized immediate dominance through demonstration of superior biotechnology and psychological warfare capabilities. When the exploration vessel New Horizons encountered an unknown alien civilization near the galactic core, Captain Lisa Park followed established procedures by demanding complete submission and acceptance of permanent human oversight. The aliens had approached with peaceful intentions, offering trade and cultural exchange. The human response was immediate and non-negotiable: total surrender or face the same fate as the Vorthik Collective. The alien delegation was provided with complete documentation of what had happened to humanity's previous enemies, along with samples of bioweapons that could be deployed against their species. Dr. Ford briefed the alien representatives on human capabilities using live demonstrations performed on captured Vorthik specimens. The aliens watched in horror as former galactic apex predators were reduced to screaming test subjects begging for death that would never come. The demonstration concluded with a simple message delivered by Admiral Morrison through translation equipment that projected his words directly into alien minds. Humanity had learned that some species should never be pushed beyond their breaking point, because what emerged from that experience was something far more dangerous than anything that had tried to break it. The alien delegation returned to their homeworld carrying knowledge that spread through their civilization like a plague of terror. Within months, their entire species had voted for unconditional surrender to human authority, rather than risk experiencing what the Vorthik had endured. Similar encounters occurred throughout the galaxy as human exploration vessels made contact with new species, using protocols designed to establish immediate dominance through superior application of terror. Few alien civilizations chose to resist after learning what resistance would cost them. The memorial centers on Earth expanded to include exhibits from multiple alien species that had chosen to oppose human expansion. Visitors could observe specimens from dozens of different worlds, while learning about the procedures that had transformed potential enemies into useful research subjects. Human children grew up understanding that their species had evolved beyond its original nature into something that other creatures feared more than death itself. They learned to take pride in humanity's transformation from victims to galactic apex predators who maintained peace through superior application of violence. The galaxy had entered a new age where human supremacy was maintained not through conventional military force but through biological weapons and psychological warfare that made traditional conquest seem merciful by comparison. Alien species competed to demonstrate their loyalty to human authorities rather than risk being selected for research purposes. Dr. Collins published her final research report documenting the complete transformation of galactic civilization under human control. The report noted that fear of humanity had become so widespread that some alien species were voluntarily modifying themselves to be more useful to human researchers. The transformation was complete and irreversible. Humanity had learned from the worst experience in their history and applied those lessons to become the thing that other species would have nightmares about if they survived long enough to dream. Earth's children played in parks built over former alien research facilities while captured specimens watched from containment cells, serving as living reminders that some wounds never heal but instead teach the wounded how to wound others more effectively than their original attackers ever imagined possible. The galaxy had learned that there were some species that became more dangerous when broken rather than less dangerous, and humanity had proven to be the most dangerous example of that principle in galactic history.